With God of War Ragnarok coming to both generations of console, it's easy to sit and worry about the performance being held back for the new generation. However, after spending well over 50 hours with it in its world at this point, it's been a game that has graphically floored me on several occasions. In this performance video, I'll be taking a look at the modes across all the consoles, giving you an insight into how it performs, and offering up my opinion on how you should experience Santa Monica Studios' masterpiece for yourself. We'll start with the performance and the base PS4, as it's the one that draws the most concern. Well, based on playing the first few hours or so on each platform, I am delighted to say that the base PS4 holds its own. Sure, the resolution's diminished substantially from its bigger brothers, but the art direction pulls it through here. In the introductory section, we can see the frame rate sticking firmly to its 30 frames a second target, and even pushing some impressive graphical effects like the snow deformation in the scene where Kratos fights the Raiders for the first time. I can't speak to some of the later areas in the game on PS4, but my expectation would be that things like particle effects and texture detail take a bit of a hit in the more busy sections. Moving up to the PS4 Pro, and it's here that things get a little bit more interesting. First off, if you play in resolution mode, you can see once again that a 30 frames a second target is aimed for and stuck to. If I had to hazard a guess, the resolution here is probably around 1440p or possibly a checkerboard 4K. Unfortunately, we don't have the resource to accurately pixel count, so you won't get a firm number from us on a definite resolution, but it is absolutely a step up from the base console. When we switch to the performance mode, however, it's where we see our first surprise. While I was playing this section on the PS4 Pro, it felt like it was running at a smooth 60 frames a second. Things were fluid with no noticeable hitches or stutters. However, running it through the frame analyzer and putting the graph over the top shows that the game hovers around 50 frames per second for the largest part. I verified this as well by going over it frame by frame, and sure enough, there is a repeated frame every 5 or 6. The frame pacing isn't consistent here, but it is performant enough to warrant at least giving it a try. Granted, the game still has time to receive another patch before launch, as there have already been 2 during my time with it, but it does seem that a locked 60 frames a second is just beyond the reach of the PS4 Pro here.
The state is not far.
Not again.
Get ready.
Falcon! She wouldn't give up that easy, would she?
She never does. Stay alert.
The rest of this video will mostly be talking about the PS5, as it's the version I've easily spent the most time with and have the most available capture for. If you have an HDMI 2.1 capable TV, there are a total of 4 different options for you to choose from. Resolution and performance modes are there for everyone, with 30 and 60 frames a second targets respectively. But if you are able to toggle on that high frame rate option, there are 2 more that become different beasts entirely. Starting with the resolution mode, it absolutely crushes its 30 frames a second target. This mode offers what I am led to believe is a native 4K output, and in my time looking at a bunch of footage, it doesn't dip from that 30 frames at all. Regardless of which mode you play on in the PS5, the game looks absolutely stunning. But if you want that scalpel sharp resolution, then the resolution mode might well be for you. Moving into the performance mode, and you can see that, much like its other one, doesn't budge from that target frame rate. 60 frames is achieved and locked without a single drop frame, and no matter how busy the screen gets, it just doesn't budge. This appears to either be a checkerboard 4K or upscaled 1440p presentation, likely with some dynamic resolution scaling implemented, with a ton of headroom to spare. I will say that during my initial run with the game, some of the later areas experienced the odd hitch, but there has been a patch with specific reference to frame timing problems that was deployed, and since that, I didn't notice anything afterwards, even revisiting the same areas. Moving on to the HDMI 2.1 options now. I had to film this off screen as there's no 2.1 capture device available outside of the hyper expensive professional solutions, but you can see the output detail window in the top right of the TV. Bear in mind that this shows the output of the console with VRR enabled. Looking at the resolution mode first, you can see that the TV is saying that it's outputting at 120 frames a second. This is due to a trick used by the developers to show each frame 3 times in order to present a 40 frames a second presentation. You can see how smooth it looks in motion. While it's not quite as fluid as 60 frames a second, it definitely feels a lot better than the standard 30 and proves that there was headroom above that cap. Similarly, when we switch over to the high frame rate performance mode, you can see the frame rate fluctuates between 70 and 90. Bear in mind that the 120 frames a second touted by some is merely the cap on the frame rate rather than a solid figure, but with the VRR capabilities of the PS5, it makes everything appear a lot smoother as well. I'm really impressed with the options that are available here, with Santa Monica giving players the chance to either have a locked frame rate of 30, 40 or 60, or completely take the shackles off and let the PS5 put out as many frames as it's capable of underneath that 120 frames a second cap. If we jump back now to the major differences between the consoles, the obvious one is of course the resolution. You can see the differences here across all 3 consoles, each with their respective modes where they're available. The texture quality improvements are definitely noticeable on the PS5, as is that resolution bump. It's definitely more apparent in cutscenes, like this moment here where Kratos enters the house and we meet Mimir again for the first time. The texture on the barrel looks good on PS5, but on PS4 and the Pro it's noticeably chunkier. However, it does seem that these elements are somewhat sensibly limited to background objects, as the vast majority of things you're going to focus on are surprisingly high res. One area that I mentioned in the review that makes it apparent the game is cross-gen is the loading areas. The developers have no way of guaranteeing that anyone on PS4 is using an SSD, so the game has to work around this bottleneck on both systems. With that caveat in place, there are quite a few squeeze through a narrow gap moments which allows the PS4 to load areas in while the animation plays out, and the biggest example of this comes when you switch between realms. While they've admirably stuck to the creative vision of having the game take place in one continuous camera shot, it means that jumping between realms has to have a significant loading time on machines with a spinning disc in them. These loads in the world tree sections are often masked with dialogue to prevent players from getting bored, but you're left to wonder, what could happen if choosing a location and opening the door would look like if the devs were able to take full advantage of that SSD? I imagine it would feel something like Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart's dimension jumps, and it would put an extra sheen on a game that is already so shiny it'll make your eyes water. It's understandable though, and something you can't really put too much fault on. They were the requirements, so that's what we got. Unfortunately, it's not something that could easily be changed specifically for the PS5 version either, as it's quite a bit of exposition that happens in these conversations, which would then have to be shoehorned in elsewhere. I know this is a technical video, but I want to make special notice of the art design in the game. In a world where there seems to be a relentless focus on making stuff a native 4K with ray tracing and all the rest of it, which usually is to the detriment of the player experience, the art style is often what pulls a game through. Santa Monica have clearly gone with a tech-first approach here, and while that often results in games potentially scaling back their art to fit, they've created some absolutely gorgeous environments. Sure, there's no light rays being traced here, but when a game looks like this for the duration of your time with it, it's really difficult to argue that it's necessary. There are some areas that I would absolutely love to show you, but won't and at the moment can't for spoiler reasons. However, it is safe to say that the game looks stunning regardless of the mode that you play it in. The final thing to talk about here with regard to the tech is the use of PlayStation's own peripherals. The DualSense shines here, with the haptics feeling miles ahead of the DualShock 4. Honestly, every time I go back to the PS4 to cover cross-gen games, it feels more and more archaic. Weapons feel different with the DualSense. You can feel the rims of your sled skating across the ice and change up as you hit deeper snow. There are moments that, once again, I can't show you for spoiler reasons, where Kratos leans up against something and you can feel the noise and motion in your hands as the controller pulses with the sound coming through. 3D audio is used very well here with the Pulse headset, allowing you to pick out an incoming Draugr attack from behind, quick turn and smash it in the face with your axe. And with that being said, what would I recommend playing it on? Well, if you're on PS4, you have one option. If you're on the Pro, the performance mode is a good option, even though it doesn't quite stick to that 60 frames a second target. However, if you have a PS5, with the modes, it does depend on your personal preference. Both modes stick firmly to their targets in the standard options, and with the high frame rate mode, the resolution offers a smooth experience that retains the fidelity offered up by that native 4K output, while the performance mode throws out as many frames as your TV can handle. Personally, I played the whole game in the regular 60 frames a second performance mode. It is a stunning technical showcase, and if you have the ability, you owe it to yourself to see this on a high-end TV. I'm fortunate enough to have an LG OLED, and this was quite possibly the most accomplished game I've ever seen from a technical perspective. The fact that it runs at all on the PS4 is something of a miracle by itself. And there we go, that is a look at the technical aspects of God of War Ragnarok. Be sure to check out our review, which went live at the same time as this video. Get yourself subscribed, check out our other content, and we've got a ton more stuff coming very, very soon, including hopefully some more Ragnarok stuff. So we'll see you soon. Alright, take care guys, bye-bye.
Seems like Father could use his memory refreshed.
My memory of them requires no refreshment.